Hey guys, Eddie back with Couch Talk. Welcome back to the show. If it's your first time with me, welcome to the show. Guys, please hit like, please hit subscribe, turn your notifications on. I promise if you stick with me, I will earn your viewership. Guys, wanted to talk today about the potential for Donald Trump getting arrested and to kind of balance what makes a good leader, what makes a good president of the United States. All right, in my opinion. As you guys know, we're staring down the potential of another Trump indictment, which almost isn't even special anymore. Like, it basically happens every couple of months. It's almost like, what is he being indicted for this time? It's like almost like every time I turn the TV on, oh, Trump kicked another puppy. What do you know? Big surprise. All right, of course, all you guys know on this channel that I never particularly liked Trump. Never thought he had the moral fortitude to be a president, right? And to me, there's a couple of things that you need to meet the bare minimum qualifications for being a president of the United States of America. One of them is you have to have at least a modicum of intellect. You don't have to be the smartest person in the world. In fact, it's quite easy to go back and point to several presidents that weren't terribly intelligent. And when I say weren't terribly intelligent, they're still all pretty smart, right? Like even the dumbest president that we have ever had is still safely in the top 30% of intellectual ability and education in America, I would say. And then part of that is, we grew up in an elitist culture, right? Like back when America started, if you weren't rich, you weren't even literate. If you weren't a landowner, it just didn't matter, right? So it took a while before, the middle class kind of like had their day in the sun, and to be literate, to be educated was a more common thing. So it took a while before that even took place. But even when that happened, I went through high school, and I was one of many very intelligent people in that school, right? But I think in my class of 400, I think I graduated 7th, which isn't bad. Now, that isn't to say that I was the 7th smartest person there. I don't know. In fact, there's some correlations between grades and education and intellect, there doesn't necessarily have to be any hard line between them. In fact, if anything, I would say I was probably smarter than my grades reflected, because I just didn't care a lot about, especially in college. When I got to college, I should have been more serious. I'm a smart guy, but even so, I'm sitting there in college, and there's a lot of classes I just didn't care much about, or classes that I put a lot of time and attention into until I realized that the teacher was set up to be biased against me, for example, and they tanked my grade. And after the first couple of essays, I realized that no matter what I did, it wasn't going to make a difference, and so then I lost interest. So there's a lot of that going on in school. So there may have been some hidden gems in my high school that just never realized their full potential. There may be some hidden gems in college that did the same, right? But just because there isn't a hard line between education and intellectual ability, it's still safe to say that to be a president, you still have to be kind of, sort of smart. You don't have to be super smart. You got to be kind of, sort of smart. And to the same extent, I would say that you have to be at least relatively morally okay, right? Like you have to have a compass that at least relatively points in the right direction. Otherwise, maybe Trump was the exception, right? Maybe he was the first exception due to the fact that he just had a lot of popularity, due to the fact that he knew how to reach people on that kind of personal level. One of Trump's strengths was to kind of convince his audience that he was talking to them in particular, and that all of his successes were their successes. You know, it was all very much like oh, we have accomplished more than anyone has in the world. And, you know, it was always a like, you with me have done better than everyone, right? And that was his, you know, I would say that was his strength, public speaking. You know, every president has their strengths and their weaknesses. But I just don't feel like Trump has enough moral character to really be a good president. He's a bit of a misogynist. You know, let's say that he isn't guilty of this new indictment, right? Like, let's say it's just, it doesn't amount to a felony, or that, you know, they can't make it stick because there's no direct line from the document to him, which there probably isn't, right? I can't imagine the document saying, I, President, or candidate Trump, hope that you will be quiet and not indicate our former business dealings, and this is a direct payment to you from me, President Trump. You know, that you know, it's just unlikely that that kind of evidence is going to be left behind. And because of that, they call this a novel legal theory, right? Because they're trying to connect the dots in a weird kind of legal way. And you know, it is what it is. If it lands great. If not, oh well, you know, they don't call him Teflon Don for nothing, right? Even if that's the case, I think we all still know what happened, right? He still did pay hush money to a porn star for an indiscretion, right? Like, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, do we want guys at the head of the United States of the world, you know, in the United States of America, the leader of the free world, do we want our example to the rest of the world to be, you know, somebody who's just a cheater, right? Cheated on his wife, can't remain faithful, a bigot, you know? I mean, I don't know that I would call Trump a racist. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I don't think that there's enough evidence to support that. You know, Trump gets a lot of labels, but even if many of those labels are false, we still have to kind of admit to ourselves that some of them are not, right? Tough to say which ones, but just law of numbers. If you're accused of, you know, 115 different things, you know, if even 10 of them are wrong, you know. I remember I used to tell this anecdote, right? Back in the day when I grew up, I was old, right? We used to have these VHS tapes, right? Put this VHS tape in the VCR, and occasionally you'd run into one that doesn't work. Well, the first thing that you would do is, if that VHS tape didn't work, you'd take it out and you'd put a different one in, right? Because it might be the tape, right? It might be the tape. And so, you know, you try another VHS tape and that one doesn't work. You might even try a third. But eventually, after you've tried enough VHS tapes and they all don't work, it's time to start thinking that maybe it's the VCR that's broken, right? And so that's what we were stuck with, right? That's back in my day. I mean, I can imagine some analogies that are more modernized, but that's just the one that I go to. Same thing with Trump, right? Maybe he isn't guilty of each different crime that is brought to his doorstep. But, guys, I gotta tell you, in order to bring a crime to someone's doorstep, it usually takes some form of evidence, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily conclusive evidence. Sometimes it can be circumstantial, right? You may think you have something, you don't really have enough, especially when it comes to, you know, the top echelon of politics, the top echelon of the finance world, the top echelon of the social world. Those guys are going to be hard to bring down. That's just how it is. That's just the truth of the matter, right? But even though it may be hard to bring those people down, you still got to bring some kind of evidence to bear, or you just don't have anything. You can't ever get it to court. So we have to acknowledge to ourselves, even those of my audience who really like Donald Trump. You know, I don't begrudge you that, but for those of you who really like him, I mean, please be honest with yourselves and realize that with the sheer number the sheer volume of legal complaints that are brought to bear on Donald Trump, he probably is not doing everything like he is supposed to. There's a hefty chance that he is doing something illegal. And, I would be hard pressed to tell you which one it is. And honestly, I don't think that this most recent frivolous lawsuit is the right one to try to bring him down. I thought they had a much better shot with the documents case. I thought they were much better shape when they were challenging Trump's right to be belligerent with the presidential records that he maintained far beyond his purview. I thought they had a much better shot at that one. But maybe that's the case is just moving too slowly for them, and they really want to try to, get him behind bars before he tries to be president again. But let's say Trump is not the right person for the job. Here's my question to the Democrats in my audience. Does this really help you? I mean, I know that Trump has a lot of influence and a lot of power. And I know that intrinsically he represents a hefty chance that Democrats won't win the presidency. And yet, given his anchors, given the problems that he has attached to him, all the baggage he's got, I would almost think you'd want that kind of person to run against, right? Like, I would, if I were a Democrat, just thinking outside the box here, right? I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican either. I'm just a conservative that can see both sides of the game, right? If I were thinking strategically here, I would rather run up against Donald Trump, especially in this matchup with Biden, because the alternative is, let's say you put Trump behind bars. Now you got to run against DeSantis. And now you're looking at a undivided Republican group who will all pool their efforts behind DeSantis, and they don't have Trump as a distraction from that polarizing figure, right? And DeSantis has basically the same, he's where Trump is on most of the policies, right? Trump pretty much adopted Republican platform ideology. Whether or not he actually thought it inside his head is something of a question, but he definitely adopted most of it so that he could earn that nomination, right? And if he's out of the way, then you've got basically another Trump, except for this Trump is refined. This Trump is a politician. This Trump knows what he's doing, how to talk to both sides of the aisle, how to get some things accomplished. It's basically like Donald Trump without the baggage, Donald Trump with much greater capability to accomplish what you probably don't want him to accomplish if you're a Democrat. So I would ask the Democrats, are you sure you want Donald Trump behind bars? I don't think you do. I think you'd much rather. Plus, there's this, right? Donald Trump, as a campaigner, he's kind of a beast when he gets into those one-on-one debates, because his greatest strength as a campaigner is he's really good at slinging mud, right? He's really good at attacking one person at a time, right? And one of the reasons that I thought Biden was strategically a good choice to run against Donald Trump the first time, and the same goes now, is that Biden's basically a ghost, right? There's nothing to attack there. You sling mud at Biden, it's just going to coast right through, because Biden just really doesn't do anything. He isn't anything. He's like an apparition. And so one of the reasons that Donald Trump failed the first time was that his standard campaigning tactic was ineffective. So Donald Trump was a bad matchup against President Biden. I don't think that DeSantis would have that problem. DeSantis is much more policy focused. He's much more like straight, edged, much more like, this is the game plan. This is what I've accomplished. and he's got an incredible record in Florida, both, fiscally, and I mean, I think, my personal opinion, I think he goes overboard with his war against wokeism. I think he gets a little bit sidetracked on that, but with everything else, he's like, the rest of this is noise. This is what we need to do, and he's been laser focused on, this is who I am as a politician. This is what I stand for. This is what I like. This is what I'm good. He's been great about that, and I think, on the Republican side, for those of my audience who are conservative, who are Republicans, I ask you this: wouldn't you rather have a candidate who is focused on actually accomplishing the things that he says he's going to accomplish, instead of being focused on just attacking his opponents? Like, I would much rather have a DeSantis than a Trump. Much rather. But then again, the opposite is true. The converse is also something to consider, right? As a Democrat, wouldn't you much rather have a Trump to fight against than DeSantis? I would, because DeSantis is a much better matchup against Biden. And he's a much more capable politician than Trump is. I would think that Trump is the lightweight now. And it may not be DeSantis' time in the sun, right? He may have to wait until next time. Because Don may still have the popularity to push him out of the way this time. If I were the Democrats, I would hope that happens first, right? But chances are none of that's going to happen, so all of this is kind of like a hypothetical. It's like waste of time. What's likeliest to happen is this thing is going to get thrown out again. Or if it does get result in some kind of indictment, it's probably going to be, after the presidency is determined. It will be when this actually lands. So it's, I don't know. But again, from Republicans, I just have to ask, do you really want to attach yourself to somebody with so many anchors, to somebody with so much extra baggage that Trump has? I mean, he's got I saw the other day, it was hysterical. I'll try to post it below if I can find it. There's this DCAA madness or something, DTAA madness bracket. It was like all of Trump's different lawsuits, to see if they could, who would make it to the Final Four, and it was hysterical. But I mean, just the fact that he's got so many of them, isn't it time to move on to a candidate who does not have so much moral baggage, so much legal baggage? I don't know. What do you guys think? Post your comments below. I'll catch you next time on Couch Talk.